That's just lesson number 1 to that correspondence course about how to be a TV serious person. Newscaster. Commentator. How unnoted local conditions work on man's mental positions, not totally unlike the relationship between a farmer's hands and a chicken's neck. That was the title. Before you can take the mythical literally, you must be able to take the literal mythically. For any of you still concerned over the possibility of life being in danger from man's running an unbridled amok, consider the thousands of years he'll stay entangled just trying to understand the above. According to one legend, the very first thing life did after man learned to speak was knock his teeth out. And yes, you're within acceptable perimeters to consider the possibility of teeth as allegorical. There was once a mystical explorer who gathered all of the known maps of all of the unknown worlds, and for many years gave them careful study. He then laid them aside, and in his own mind plotted the possible ways until abandoning these. And sometime after that, the day came when he actually sailed away with no further thought or comment, which is why, about such men, so little is ever heard. There was once a man who discovered a secret and decided he'd tell his best friends about it. But by the time he got around to it, he'd come to recognize why they were his best friends and realize that simply telling them was not the thing to do. The people of the village got together and finally stormed the home of the man who seemed to know too much. And before they could extract whatever painful price they had in mind for him, he stepped from the door with an envelope in his hand saying, "Congratulations, you may have already won a valuable prize in our sweepstakes." How the ordinary got all confused with notions of past lives, future lives, reincarnation, and a secret line of mystical succession. Until Lyle died, and I mean really died, Buddha couldn't say anything. When routine thinkers wish to increase their renown for humility, they'll say, "We stand on the shoulders of giants." Meanwhile, those actually up to something are throwing their back out, trying to climb up on their own shoulders. Humor, a simple man's metaphor. Query, in the land of nothing but fleas, of what significance are shrines to their own kind? Yeah. Finding, if you can't get out of here, then no matter where you are in here is of any consequence, much less of interest or use. Humor, if you're simple, you just gotta love it. Talk, the mother of all vicariousness. God, I can't get... I guess that's why they're on the network and I'm not. Standing before life, the man said, "I am humble about what I know." And life replied, "And well, you should be." Meanwhile, later, the man thought about this and was not as sure that it was as complimentary as he had first assumed. Conversation overheard at the convention. Hormones in the body can certainly make it behave mechanically and repetitiously. Yes, and same for thinking when they're in the head. The field of natural science never reached its fullest potential due to where it was headed. Hey, with the ordinary, when enough's enough, they'll say so. 'Tis only the mythical travelers and thinkers who will press on long after it's dark and all the normal cows have gone back to the barn. A foolishness of such singular, staggering magnitude and impact in the life of man as to normally pass unnoted and unnamed. One man giving another man advice on how he should live. The voice of the immediate vicinity said, "There are going to be some tough questions asked, and you had better have some answers." And the man realized he had heard it all before. It's just like in having a real weird supernatural experience. Those who have and want to talk about it do, and those who have and don't. Hey, viewer writes, "I used to write to you about stuff like that, but I don't anymore. Thanks." Now for some small livestock news. How can you tell if a pig is dead? He'll be real serious. Forget the rest. In the battle for consciousness, the best offense is originality. One guy wondered, what's the worst thing about the simple? That they're dumb or that they're dangerous? Later, in response to his musing, he reminded himself, hey, don't look at me. Hermit, a man under the delusion that he's off by himself. Mystic, one who actually kind of is. What continues to elude, confuse, and confound the ordinary is that anything that can be said about the body can also metaphorically be said about the mind. Andrew, can you explain for the class the meaning of the maxim, acorns do not far from the tree fall? Yeah, it means we're all nuts. The four levels: life, local conditions, the immediate vicinity, and you. These repeat themselves over and over again, both up and down and from the larger to the smaller. All aboard, whether you want to be on board or not. Though normally kept under wraps, I will tell you this much. Of all the wondrous things the enlightened may know, at least one of them is knowing where they are. Is not the enjoyment of all art vicarious, unless you're the artist? Here's what we do, exclaimed an excited young would-be mystic. Let's kill all the older ones who described how to reach the state. But 'tis not necessary, not even possible, since all who know are always long dead before such words are put in their mouth. No judgment or determination is of value to the few until they've walked a mile in their shoes. To the really committed thinkers, even reading is damn near plagiarism. Verbal badminton. Only the stupid offer advice. Wait, let me guess. And only idiots accept it, right? 200, love. Attenzione, all travelers. You have a choice. Either eat a map or actually go somewhere. Daddy, why would anyone who knows what's going on tell a lie like that about everyone having a choice? Well, son, if everybody is not going to just stand around staring at their feet till the bus comes, they got to talk about something now, don't they? And as he pondered his old man's words, it struck him that they'd been through this before more than once. Then suddenly, Lord love a greyhound, it hit him even stronger exactly what it is that a map is and the purpose that it serves. Or at least should serve regarding the knowledgeable traveler. If your thinking is predictable, then thinking you're not. the Olympian life and personal effort. For the metagnostic athlete, that lived physically vicariously is no great loss, other than muscle tone, but done mentally is suicidal. You see, the undiscussable gap between the mystic and everyone else is that ordinary people can be made to realize how dumb they are and will accept it, and mystics won't. How to save the expense of a psychiatric evaluation to determine whether or not you have a mental defect. There are 3 basic methods. Take your pulse to see if you're alive, look in a mirror, or listen to yourself think. Okay, phew, after that, I guess it's time to kind of lighten the mood a bit. So here's one. How to determine if you have a drug problem. This one entails just one question to ask yourself. Do you have a problem getting drugs? Of course, this is all irrelevant to those of you now manufacturing your own neural drugs at home, so to speak. Question. If originality is the solution, then what are the impediments to achieving same? Potentially correct answers. Predictability, consistency, and mechanicalness. Professor, is that a new discovery? You'll have to tell me, you will have to define for me your use of the term new. Well, I don't believe I use it any differently than everyone else. Then you will have to tell me exactly what you intend by the word I. The notion that useful nourishment for geese was the same as that for ganders was a literal misapplication of the mystics' mythical understanding of just how chow for the infantry was not to be served to the generals. The voiceover intoned. Tune in next time when a mysterious illness turns deadly. And the man mused, yeah, life. When the dumb don't know what to say next, they tend to want to fight. Go ahead, ask me the question of whether or not this insight couldn't be of practical use in the reconnoitering of one's own internal two-party conflict. Go ahead. Everyone wants to prove that they're right, except those who know they are. Primitive loyalties and the interest of the ambitious. The swearing of allegiance secretes a misfeasance in how, on the predictable, an honor it bestows. The weak make fun of the weak. The weak make fun of the strong. So what else is new? The question of the day. What in the mental life of man is not a form of vicariousness? Originality, that's all. That's all in all. Remember, reminded the Commandante of the Naval Academy, there is a view from which everything looks like everything else. And a young sailor asked, what do you call this view? Great, he replied, a truly great view. One man's conclusive take on human speech. Quoting now, all words are hollow, impotent, and irrelevant except for 3. Ready, aim, fire. Of course, then followed by a really great original view. As hard as it may be for any of us to accept, it's been pointed out that perhaps I made an error, a mistake, if you will. I prefer not to last time from reading one. Now, whether that was the writers here on the show, whether it was their fault, or whether it was me, the professional reader in prison, but it was supposed to have gone to wit. Another mark between those to the mystical born and the everyday is that the former approach philosophy at an early age, then move on, while the latter do so later in life as hormones begin to run down. If you'll recall where we were last time, I'll try to pick it up. I like that fake humility, I'll try to pick it up. I'm about to pick it up. Still in the general area of originality as a kind of mystical system, what predictability is, and back specifically where we were, did I point out that a certain line could be seen, even though it is not actually linear, but some way we can talk, but what would appear to be a kind of progress going from literal thinking to metaphorical thinking to symbolic thinking. And then even in case any of the Cornelian neon filters blow up in the cameras again, perhaps I can even take it further. No promises, because we do not want any more of those kerosene fumes loose here in the studio. Well, as you know, we're trying to get that building fund to buy some of those electronic cameras now, those newer models. But if you recall, I was pointing out that although it is now in connotative use that metaphor and symbolism are synonymous, and it's of no linguistic, rhetorical importance, but that there was a basis, still is a basis, but at one time life speaks very directly, very plainly, and as civilians would call it, very truthfully. Never disingenuously, originally. But then, after life once speaks, which is the first guy, whoever says whatever it was, after that, it is all, what do you call it? Pointing down. After that, it's irrelevant. Would you care to clarify what you just said? You're wasting our time, but all right. That is that originally life made a very specific distinction, and it is still worthwhile for a certain purpose. That being the literal is, the example I was using, that there is a Persian cat. The metaphorical, of course the literal means from all ordinary views, it means exactly what it means. That's the only attempt. You're not trying to be funny, sarcastic, you don't have a hidden message. It's like someone says, have you seen my cat? And you said, your cat's right there. Your cat's here in the kitchen. That's all you meant. Metaphor is when you say one thing and you actually mean, you intend something else. That is, if you said when that so-and-so, old Andrew, he is luckier, he has more lives than a cat. Back to the old thing that cats are so agile and that they have more than one life, when you know that that is not literally true, no one assumes it's true, and the speaker did not intend it to convey anything literal. It was intended to mean something other than was said. Yeah, he has more lives than a cat. He's not speaking about a cat, he's not speaking about literal lives, because you know that Andrew does not have more lives than a cat. Then symbolism, now metaphor, symbolism is when you say one thing, like when the cat's away, the mice will play. That is true, literally. And it is also true at another level. And that normally when anybody says it, they do not, in that particular case, and in many symbolic cases, even if they knew what they were doing, they're not making the literal reference, because how many people sit around and worry about the mice in their house? Or the mouses in their houses, that they're talking about something else, that you're talking to someone and there goes Andrew, and somebody talks about the latest grape that he extracted himself therefrom, and someone says, yeah, that son of a gun has more lives than a cat. And it's not a metaphor. That is, you don't mean other than it is, you did in its use, but the sentence itself is both literally true. That is, it can mean what it says, but it can also mean something else. Now, last time we had moved up to the metaphorical use. And I was pointing out to you that a very minute number of people ever think in any consistent way metaphorically. And I may not have made it very clear, but there is of own personal use and interest you or should be, is the fact that very routine, civilized, sophisticated thought tells you otherwise. That is, that philosophy, literature, social commentators, just all sorts of people throughout history, life has had people saying otherwise, saying that the great works of art, that is, stuff that's remembered, things are still reprinted, perhaps a little beyond the fact that they're now in public domain, you don't have to pay royalties on them, for those of you that don't know about that. It's surprising. Never mind. All right, you don't know. It's surprising how few works of great value they are when they're still under copyright, when you got to pay royalties. Well, see, they've never figured out. I mean, Shakespeare was just kind of considered, just a hack, like a would-be Oheim, until the copyrights ran out, and then suddenly he decided everybody wanted to reprint him and go, a great national British treasure. Checking with their attorneys. You sure we don't have to pay any more royalties on his work? You can also, those of you getting sharp, you can also take that, even though I'm being somewhat facetious, you can take that as a symbolic message, and I could stop and go off with that. That we're not talking about a writer and his works getting past the point of the royalty statutes, the dates involved, because you can now think things and not have to pay royalty. Think about that. I know you think, well, wait a minute, would that be a benefit metaphorically or symbolically? We can't stay in one place forever. So we're moving on. Anyway, metaphorically, what I was saying, I know that that would be one of the criterion, I'm sure, if you got people to describe what is the common denominator, what is the first characteristic of let's take literature, because that's much easier and usually the more common one that is to which application is made of a metaphorical label. That is, even ordinary minds, it's hard enough for them to hear the story generally of Moby Dick and hear it's about a guy chasing a whale. Maybe they saw the movie one time and you go, the movie, I know it looked like an adventure, an action story, but the actual piece of literature, had you read the original, was much more than that, it was a deep metaphorical message. To begin with, most humans on this planet at any given time have no concept of what a metaphorical message is. You understand? But, back to the segment that seems to be the protectors of our cultural literacy, etc., they're the ones that say that the great works of art, that the characteristic, the common denominator, the basis, the minimum requirement is that it have a metaphorical significance. That is the only reason that works of, quote, fiction have survived and become classic works of art, is because they're not simply fiction. That the Molières and the Balzacs and the Dickens did not simply write fiction, not in the ordinary sense of the word. Oh, yeah, it was fiction, perhaps. They made up the stories and the names. But just look, the figures, the Scrooges, all the figures have become like archetypical in our thinking because there was a metaphorical message involved. No such thing. Not at the time they wrote it. People who could write metaphorical fiction, where's Reverend Spooner when we need him? To write metaphysical fortune? Anyway, those who could actually sit down and purposely write metaphorical fiction, those who could are not very, shall I put it to you like this, inclined to do so. Because the fact is, they're not very inclined to write anything anyway. But do understand, like as always, there's not men doing anything anyway. You people watch on TV, go ahead and turn it off now, because I know I've already gone too far. I was tried to always save that kind of stuff toward the end, but it's life speaking to man, sending out the messages. But as far as there being some segment of humanity, ordinary humanity, that consistently, in some statistical, observable number, as far as there being such people who can write, appreciate, hear, benefit from metaphor, forget it. It is all after the fact. It is all having to take a story and say, wait a minute, this is not actually about a guy pulling a thorn out of a lion's paw. No, this has another significance. Or this is not actually about a man going up on a mountaintop and the gods came down and talked to him and gave him some kind of laws. No. Yes. The former view does not hold up. There is no consistent segment of humanity capable of writing such directly, purposefully, and willfully, nor is there a sizable number of people capable of hearing it and appreciating it and benefiting from it directly. Now, when it's pointed out, I am quite aware, in case you're missing the point, I am quite aware that philosophers, critics, even just people in the field of academic literature, I know that they can stand up and present a nice, interesting lecture about how certain religious works, especially if it's not native to their culture. It's easier for a Christian to talk about Hindu literature, and it's easier for a Buddhist to talk about Zoroastric literature. But as for someone such as that to take a work of fiction or otherwise and to point out the metaphorical significance, now they can do it. So I don't mean that the human mind, ordinarily speaking, is not capable of it. But insofar as that being some stable, continuing part of people's mind, some segment out there in humanity, it is not. That is part of the plagiarism, that is part of the continuing need for cannibalism. It is part of the sequential holdover, it is part of the non-ending parade, that is part of what critics, in the broadest sense of the word, the purpose they serve is to interpret after the fact how this was metaphorical. You can look at it another way, is it's life's little sort of humorous way. I'm not going in, I'll be humorous too on top of it. It's kind of life's little humorous way of trying to slip in, some cod liver oil in the midst of your Twinkie. How's that? That's not it, but that makes as much sense as anything. It's like life trying to slip you in some important mystical information, just in the garb of fiction, just entertainment, and it kind of slips you a message to where it won't hurt you. People like that crap. They go, oh, I can dig that. The truth is, I hate to step on it before I even get into it good, but the truth is, metaphor, once something becomes metaphorical, it's about done for anyway. It's like somebody has already, if it was something originally that had a secret message in it, then it's like a cream-filled donut that a real fat person has sat on for about 3 days in a sweatsuit. So by the time it gets to you, that is, to you, the ordinary intellectual consumer, using you generically, the ordinary person, by the time they hear this great metaphor, suffice it to say, from my little made-up example, it's in pretty rank condition. I mean, if they knew what they were doing, they would not touch it, period. Much less think, well, I am engaged in an attempt to hungrily consume it. And it's a good thing you don't know what it's been through. But metaphorical thinking, back to where it was, metaphorical thinking, I do want you to understand, is about as far as the historical, publicly known aspect of metaphysics, mysticism, the great secret work, the great struggle to increase consciousness, all of that, that is about the supreme level commonly known is the metaphorical. To wit, if you took amongst ordinary people the best that they had to offer, would be mystics, I normally call it. People just kind of fooling around with it. People that might turn on something like this and go, listen to it sometimes, think, that's kind of interesting. People that one time believe they were interested, and still when they can hear it a certain way and in the right mood go, yeah. To them, and I don't mean just some individual now that I'm making up, I'm talking about also a large segment of the human population still after the fact interested in what appears to be in retrospect, or futurospect, according to how agile you are on your neural feats. They look upon such things as the life and teaching of Buddha or of Confucius, things that may appear to be less secular, more clerical. It just seems to sort of shift, but they can see, they believe in retrospect, looking back upon it, that they see, or it's presented to them in books and would-be histories of some mystical tradition. It is all presented on the basis of metaphor. And to them, to that sort of person, that is a step up. That is higher than the ordinary intellect ever goes, including atomic physicists, molecular scientists, chemists. No offense to any of them, but as far as the working of the human mind, and they're dealing in the literal. It's not either good or bad, but they're dealing in the literal. That's their job. But anywhere beyond the literal, the highest that the ordinary mind ever goes is the metaphorical. And so we're not kicking that around. That is, from all ordinary views, whatever, you just have to pick up your own. If you consider that Zen was in some way a real historical, maybe even continuing paradigm of some great secret work, or not necessarily secret, Buddha's description of enlightenment, of wandering the face of the earth, being perplexed and even concerned. He drew in even physical ail and etc., that all of it was curable by one thing and one thing only: enlightenment. That is, suddenly you go, well, I'll be damned, that you understand what life's about. You can look upon, and they do, the Zen or Sufism or the mystical aspect of Judaism and Christianity. They look upon it as in a metaphorical way, at best. And at best, remember, I don't mean that negative now. I'm saying that in a certain quite real respect, it is a step up. That there are people around, if it's pointed out just at all, if they get any nourishment out of it, the nourishment they are getting is metaphorical. That it is not literal. Because the literal aspect, say, of the belief that Christianity, or all religion, but let's say Christianity, the belief that, or the assumption that there is a useful, in this lifetime, individual message having to do with consciousness somewhere in Christianity. Let's take that. That is metaphorical, and that is quite a difference than the proverbial little old man and woman, the nice simple folk of the earth who go in, and whatever the religion is, but since I picked Catholicism, they go in, they go through all the rituals and the kneeling and making the sign, and they light candles, and they're actually, in a sense, childlike. In fact, sometimes they use it as a positive statement, description, the childlike faith. That is, they just go through the motions. They go through a ritual, and they say that they enjoy it, or they say they feel better. Whatever they say, they take it literally. If a priest, whatever they say in the church, the priest is saying, you take this and make the sign, or if you committed something that made you feel bad, go home and say 10 Hail Marys or whatever it is. They take it quite literally, and they ask no more. And what I'm saying is, from that view, at the ordinary city view, it is a step up. It is an enrichment. It is a kind of complexity of thinking, as opposed to the simple folk of the earth who were always there, and perhaps your mother and father fits the classification, and I do not mean insultingly. That's all they ask for. They take the same thing that the would-be mystics are taking to be a metaphorical, at least parts of it. They keep suspecting that in Christianity and all religion, they keep suspecting there's a metaphorical message. There's something in there. They take it at that kind of more complex level, as opposed to the vast majority, and we're talking the high 90s people, the high 90 percentile of humanity that take everything, including religion, literally. That's all they want. That's all they ask. They're not interested anymore. If you try to tell them it's metaphorical, the only thing that strikes them, if they listen at all, is, wait a minute, you're trying to be blasphemous. That's all it amounts to. I slipped in on you, whether it made any sense. I heard several gasps that to ever take things mythically, you've got to first take them literally, and vice versa. Okay. Metaphorically is a step upward. And it is a more complexity, is an enriching of thought, even if it never goes any further. That is why I was also trying to throw into you that, in a sense, humor is a simple man's metaphor. To enrich that a bit, humor, besides other things it serves, but it's operating at its best, humor is a simple man's attempt to think metaphorically. It's an attempt not to simply look at things literally as going on, but to find that there's another level. That's the only thing that makes humor work. Now, this is a different thing besides the aggression I talked about, but it's tied to, this is just another view, but without there being another level. If you take all jokes literally, take the punchline and literally, you might have to change the word just a little bit, but just if you think about literally what was said, no joke is funny. None. There has to be a level beyond the words, outside the words. God, does that sound familiar to anybody? The secret teachings. That was the description of Zen as opposed to the orthodoxy of Buddhism, if you recall. And the Sufis had their version, but a truth outside the teaching. There has to be a level, there has to be an interpretation, there has to be a view of the punchline outside the literal, outside of what the words say. If you just take the words and nothing else, if you could stop your mind from seeing another picture when you heard the words of the punchline, whatever the punchline, just take the punchline of any joke, the latest one that made you laugh, and your mind is seeing something beyond what the words literally would normally represent. And if you can grab your mind and stop it from doing it and go back and use the same words that made you laugh an hour ago, it's not funny. That is, it's an attempt for a person to think metaphorically. Very simple, and people usually get stuck there. I tried to slip in one on you several nights ago about that many comedians are like people who originally saw something, thought they saw something, then laughed it away. It's almost, maybe now you can get a better grip on it. It's almost like someone, let's say, I'm just making up another example, of someone that was about to lose their religion, small r, and become an atheist and decide to laugh about it and make a joke, sort of a sarcastic joke. That's where the aggression comes into humor, sort of a sarcastic joke at religion, and it saves them from absolutely losing all religion. Because if you can laugh at it a little bit, which is also, for those of you getting real fast, are you getting this fast? It's one of the ordinary purposes, unrecognized, of humility. It's like forgiving yourself for not being much. Trying to clean up the language around here. I was going to say, forgive yourself for being a piece of shit, but for not being as much as you could be. That is a part of the use of humility, but which again is humor. So it made you laugh. Why did you laugh? Think about that. We don't have time to stop. That'll take too long. That's right. It's easier just to laugh about it and go, oh, well, okay. And you hope I'll press on like a big old Peterbilt. About a 19-wheeler, perhaps. I guess that got all the truckers to turn off. Got rid of them. We get rid of the vicarious athletic. No, I won't do that. Metaphorical thinking is a kind of step forward. Truly is. Then when you get into your own personal way that you can run a parallel line of metaphorical thought, you're approaching symbolic. And I'd promised almost someone who asked me that I would get to the third stage of the symbolic tonight, but as always I lied to them because we're about to run out. But that does not mean that there's not always another time. Because as those fine students in the University of Pennsylvania will tell you, there's always more time. A later date. How deep is it possible, I ask you, those of you that major in geology and well digging, how deep is it possible to bury an allegory and actually retrieve it and it still have any life in it? I'll tell you how long. Well, I was trying to encourage you, at least you think, well, I'll go away and think about that. Nah, you see, it only has life that long anyway. And so you're going away and think about it. Next thing you know, you'll be back reading books and, crap like that. And you're just sure, though, there's some important information here. I mean, this is a book. It's just, nobody ever likes to think about it. It's little dots of ink on a piece of paper. Would you like to explain that metaphorically? No. No. The benefit of metaphorical thinking, of running a parallel kind of metaphorical thinking, but remember it's running parallel to literal thinking. It is not an abandonment. Abandonment of literal thinking, your awareness of literal thinking is insanity. You would have lost it. You could yourself then become a charismatic metaphysical teacher. I mean, if you lose so much touch that you no longer can think literally, that you're not aware of it, that is when you indeed can begin to communicate with Rod Serling and other departed gods, Gene Roddenberry. You can become weird as anybody. But you have lost it totally. Metaphorical thinking is not a kind of walking around insanity, a kind of dazed condition, a kind of otherworldness to the point that you cannot function up here. It has to be running parallel. You never lose the awareness of the literal. You cannot. It's just not open to debate. It's not a speculation, which is one of the sort of pathetic things once you begin to see it. And then, of course, pathetic's not the word, but when you see in the would-be mystics of the world, now, thousands of years ago, all they go through, and once you see it, you understand why they went through it, why they tried to dress funny, why they had to come up with all kinds of strange rituals. You understand the whole trappings of mystics who, as we say technically, don't know nothing. It's to cover it up. Once you lose track of the literal, you cover it up with things that make no sense whatsoever, and it's almost a metaphorical attempt itself to symbolically represent your loss of innocence vis-a-vis the literal. Did you follow that? I believe the lifespan is getting shorter even as we talk. It is not either or in the first two stages, that is, from the literal to the metaphorical. We're not to the symbolic yet. It is not either or. You cannot abandon the literal. There's no way to, there's no benefit. It's not even open to questions, so I want you to understand. It is not that metaphorical thinking, when I keep saying another level, it's not like, well, I've outgrown literal. You don't outgrow literal thinking unless you go nuts, if you call that growing up. Unless you go crazy, just absolutely lose touch. I hate to say with reality because people think they know what that means, but they use the term. It's their term, so I'll go along with it. Here's the thing. If you can think, you understand, I'm really, even though it's non-linear, but some way we can talk about it, that here it goes, your mind is picking up the same messages it always has from life. I mean, you got no choice unless you just get unplugged and they have to put you away and feed you and change your diapers. Is literal thinking and your comprehension of it continues unabated, just like it always has, assuming you've always been walking around sane. But then if you can begin to think in a parallel way, metaphorically. Parallel now, it's not that it replaces it, it does not usurp it, it is running literally parallel to literal thinking. That you're aware of everything they're saying, you're aware, you hear commercials, you hear people talk about religion, art, sports, politics, their bunions, anything. But it becomes almost consistent. I shouldn't say almost. It is a consistent ability. It is a consistent metaphorical awareness running parallel to your continuing literal awareness of human thought. But the benefit is, it has a very specific benefit, even this side of symbolic thinking, and obviously this side of the mystical experience itself, the actual enlightenment. But what it does is a kind of protection, because it saves you from being entangled and trapped with the apparent seriousness of literal thought. As I've hinted and put right in your face, there being none. But it saves you from it. It saves you from the useless, even destructive inclination to criticize that which is taking place in the literal thought-based world. If you see this, if you can begin to see it yourself, it explains all of the somewhat, all of the crude attempts of men trying to say, through the voice of religion, morality, if you take all of the basic tenets and dogmas of all religions having to do, the parts have to do with the interplay between humans. Mainly, treat your brothers yourself. Don't pick on someone else until you've walked a mile in their regions. Don't be trying to pull a size 10 out of your neighbor's eye or ass until you pull the size 14 out of your own. Love your neighbors yourself. God loves a humble man. Blessed are the common, and etc. All of it had to do with don't judge. Nothing new with that. And I keep apparently trying to get you to consider some form of aversion, some form of new understanding of all forms of criticism. But it has nothing to do with morality, it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with the fact that it's a dead-end street. It has to do with the fact that you must still be, it's proof positive, that you are still thinking literally to be critical of other thinking. If I need to remind you, we're talking about thinking now, not behavior, which is always simple to explain. That is, if someone comes up and hits you, that is not criticism. And assuming that you're sane and you don't have plans to die today, and you've already paid in advance or something you got to, then turn around and hit them back if you want to. That is not criticism. That is not resistance that we're speaking of now. We're talking about areas that are not based, they're not limited to, or they're not based on physical survival. That is the only criticism that we're speaking of. As long as you think literally, you're always in a kind of critical mode. You're always in a position from which there is no egress. There is no way to ever come to a fruitful conclusion. Because no matter what you criticize in somebody else's thought, all you're doing is, you go, wait a minute, you can't do that, and you start chewing on their toe. And they go, oh yes I can, and they start chewing on your ear. And you go, well, now wait. And you consider the chewing on your ear that they're doing. It goes on verbally, and you go, instant counterpoint, but, and then you're up to their ankle. And they go, well, wait a minute. And they go, if I may quote that great Greek poet, and now they're firmly down your neck. Can you picture two cannibals sitting there? You're starting on his feet and he's starting on your head, and you're just, you're going to chew yourself to death, and it's getting nowhere. If I must take this metaphor further, human flesh is not nourishing to humans. Think on that metaphorically. Don't go out and try it literally, come on. Next thing you know, I'll have some Argentine soccer team suing me for plagiarism. At the first stage, at the first mental survival stage, you are in cotton, if I may use a southern cliche. When you can think in a parallel way, metaphorically, to the literal. Because you have you have reached a plateau of safety of which the ordinary know nothing. Because it is no longer a struggle of like, wait a minute, I shouldn't pick on my fellow man just because he has Muslim ideas and I'm Jewish, or just because he has Christian ideas and I'm a Buddhist, or just because he has Republican ideas and I'm a socialist. There is no struggle anymore. That is what is missing from a more complex view, from a would-be mystic's view, from all behavioral attempts to awaken, to become enlightened. Because there is nothing out there to change. There is nothing to resist, and it cannot be explained. It cannot be, even those who go, yeah, I hear it. If you say, hey, the world is just right. I can start making up jokes, except I don't have to make them up. I can extract them right from serious writings, mystical writings, right now, thousands of years ago. People start off an article, and they'll say, I have now been, although I'm Belgian, I have now been an active practitioner of the Zen philosophy. I have been studying Zen. I've studied with this and this master and this and that. And now I'm back here. I'm in Tibet. I have snuck in and I'm trying to help the people there to regain all that they have lost from the squashing of their religious beliefs, because Zen is the way of compassion, understanding, and tolerance, which that's the beginning of Zen. And within one paragraph, they're just raising hell with the Chinese, with the Indians, with everybody that's come in, with modern society, that they have wrecked these poor people's primitive, pristine, right-thinking philosophy by all of this crap. See, it's so obvious you missed it. All right, calling Captain Irony right quick for a walk-on. All you're getting is union tonight, though, just scale. See, it's not just sarcasm, it's that there's no way out. It's not just irony. You understand, the whole thing was people start an article report about I'm a Buddhist. And even saying, with a Buddhist, I am not here with any axe to grind. I have none of my own personal menus or agendas to present, because Buddhism is the acceptance of life, all of humanity. But I have been over here now toiling in the fields, humbly trying to serve my fellow man here in such and such place. And these people at one time had all the aspects of the potential Buddha mind, and now they are being absolutely ruined by Western technology and advertising, and damn tourists coming in here, and I don't know what all is just going to ruin these poor people. And you go back up, 2 paragraphs or 2 sentences. It's not irony. The only thing ironic in life is people thinking that there is irony. That isn't a definition of, well, how totally unexpected. Oh, really? That's the only thing ironic, is that people find things ironic. Thinking, if you can think in a parallel way, metaphorically, along with that which is going on literally, that you're still aware of it, you are then relieved of all of that. It is not a struggle anymore. It is not a theoretical form of combat. It is not some intellectual sport. It is not some previously intellectual faux pas taken by man from which you must now straighten up your step. It is not some entanglement into which humans have fallen because of some error in the past, and now from which you must extract yourself. It's none of that anymore. It's none of the very things that other people believe that they are. Lighting candles, fasting, whirling, dancing, sitting, standing. They're the very things that they think, well, I'm trying to work my way through this, which has been one of the common terms. I'm trying to work my way through this, and then they fill in whatever it is, this morass of human delusion based upon greed and whatever. Again, not noticing, being unable to notice that no one has ever done that. Well, don't people ever say they can or did, as those who didn't. Those who can never did say that. You do not work your way through it. But at any rate, I could get some of those people even momentarily to realize that something has a peculiar aroma about the idea of working through it, and I might get them to see that, yeah, working through it is at least problematic, if not doubtful. I could say, and then just for a second they go, that is weird, isn't it? Because I always thought it was true, and I always thought that that's what these other old mystics and all the writings meant, is to work your way through it. Put simply, you cannot work your way through it. And people, the human mind knows that. The human mind knows that in the same way that it knows that there is not a beginning or end to a circle or a merry-go-round. They know it, they don't like it, and they don't know what to make of it, and they'd prefer not to think about it. Well, they'd prefer not to think about it if you insist that there is some great import therein. Because then they go, wait a minute, if that's true, I'm too dumb to realize it. Well, now we're getting somewhere. Rather than dumb, replace literal-minded. The salvation of all this, you cannot think your way out, you cannot moralize your way out, you cannot rosary your way out, pray your way out. There's no way you can behave your way out. And at the ordinary literal level, you cannot think your way out. The, quote, salvation is, you don't even fool with that. The literal thinking is what they're working against. That's what they believe the struggle is about. Anybody gets beyond the behavioral level. There is no way to straighten that out. It's not crooked. There is no way to stop it. There is no way to rectify it. There is no way to overcome it, except go crazy, as we pointed out. If you can begin to think in a parallel manner constantly, Not because you're saying somebody says, oh, read this. Somewhere in there's a metaphorical message. You just walk the streets. You just see a bus ad go by. You just see a guy stand on the street and go, taxi. I am shaving it down to a fine point, I agree. But don't you bet that there's not a metaphorical possible message there. At any rate, the way out is not a struggle with it. Is the literal world. We're talking intellectually now, not the physical, because